Morning, church. We thank God for yet another privilege that God has given you and I. They are alive and well. This morning, we're going to be pressing on that same topic that we have been looking at for quite some time. Examine yourself. But I coined it, examine yourself, know your numbers. There are certain numbers that we need to know that will tell us that we are healthy or not. Media, can you support me, please? Yeah, the first thing I like to look at is the scripture we have been reading, 2 Corinthians 13:5, and to give us the doctor's version of 2 Corinthians 13:5. Media, please. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, examine yourself to see whether you are in the faith. And it goes further to say, test yourselves. Or do you not realize this about yourself? That Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail to meet the test. Now, I noticed that, yes, you have read that. The second scripture I want to read is 2 John verse 2, which has just been mentioned. Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers. Now, the medical version says, examine yourself to see whether you are in health. Test yourselves. Or do you not realize this about yourself? That Jesus Christ wishes that you be in health, just as your soul prospers, unless indeed you are ignorant or careless. So what will not make us to pay attention to the numbers or to examine ourselves or to take note of this thing is if we're ignorant or if we're careless. But the first one is going to be addressed. The issue of ignorance will be addressed today. We will now be left whether you care about your body or you don't. Now the WHO, next slide please. WHO define health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Some of us will say, okay, because I'm not feeling anything. No headache, no leg pain, no trouble in my neck, I can move around, so I'm healthy. But we know that this is not true. You are looking at some physical health, but this definition contains also mental health and social well-being. And other things that have not been added. Note the word, not just the absence of disease or infirmity. And so that's why we'll be looking at some health conditions that may not tell you that they are there. There are several of them, except you examine yourself and you keep tab on certain numbers. And that includes a very important disease I'll be focusing on, and that's hypertension. A lot of people, about 52% of people who have high blood pressure don't even know they have anything. They don't feel anything. They have no problem as far as they are concerned. In short, we are the one that tell them they have problem. And that's why some of them may not keep, to continually taking their drugs. But let me just put some background to this issue of hypertension. There are so many of them I'm interested in. Hypertension is there, mental health is there, other cardiovascular diseases are there, but there are things we cannot finish in the period that is given to me. Now, we know that the health sector in Nigeria is currently sick because it's also not healthy. The health sector is not healthy because it's poorly funded with weak health infrastructural investment. You go to our hospitals, a lot of things that we're supposed to have, are not there because most of our people who should care about such don't use our facilities. They have their own facilities that they use. They are poorly funded. They have poor financial access to health by the individual. In some countries where the leadership care about people's health, you don't need to have catastrophic expenditure on health. You don't need to spend money that would drain two-third to almost, the whole of your 1 month salary. But that's what happens in our own country. People still pay out of pocket. Our health insurance system is still weak and is still not widely acceptable. There is their shortage of health workers as a result of economic and social brain drain. And the average lifespan, you see, several of us see a lot of people these days because you know them. The people you know that drop dead. And if it is becoming rampant, you start wondering, what is happening? Somebody told me recently, said, Pastor, we should check what is going on in church. I said, it's not only in church. It's just because you happen to know those people. The truth is that our life expectancy at birth is very low. Very, very low. Life expectancy at birth in Nigeria is 54.5 years. Meaning that when you give birth to a child like this, you have given that child a chance of living for 54.5 years. So those of us who have crossed over, we have escaped that prediction. Okay? So knowing all that, it means that what it takes for us to scale through, we have a role to play. And that's why we're talking about this topic. And they said even men are expected to die earlier than women. Men 53.4 years, women 55.6 years. Now, Nigeria happens to, among the whole world, you see, we are taking position 167. That is how much our life expectancy is bad. 167 position. Okay, next slide. So what are the factors that contribute to this low life expectancy? A lot of our babies die at infant level. In short, one of the things I was taught in school is that 25% of children born in Nigeria will not celebrate their 5th birthday. 25% of babies born in Nigeria will not celebrate their 5th birthday. They will not live till 5 years. So infant mortality is very high. Infectious diseases like HIV, malaria, TB, then malnutrition, which is also due to poverty, ignorance, and many other things. People are not well fed, they're not eating good food. Then poor health infrastructure. You go to health facilities, what it takes to provide you proper care, they are not there, doctors and all those. Then low vaccination rates, and then the issue of conflict and violence. Now, the other challenge we are having now as a nation is the fact that Nigerians are rapidly taking over lifestyles that were foreign to us. Lifestyle of affluence that is bringing closer to us emerging diseases, which are non-communicable. If you notice the things that I read before, they were the communicable diseases, diseases that can go from one person to another. But we are now gradually moving to another layer of disease conditions that will kill a lot of our people. So, majority of people now are dropping dead from cardiovascular diseases. Many of us have watched ministers on pulpit just collapse. There was one that was very, very, very dramatic. The man was talking about demons and works of satanic whatever. It just looked as if he himself received an attack. Meanwhile, it was due to a lot of pressures, lack of rest, lack of care for the numbers that we're talking about. So we see hypertension, we see stroke, coronary heart disease, challenges of the heart muscles. Then we have cancers, chronic respiratory diseases, diabetes, which we talked about the other time, and also mental health. These are, diseases that we should look after. But today, we're going to pay attention on hypertension. Hypertension is usually called a silent killer because many people who have raised blood pressure will not know. Men are worse because men don't go to the hospital. Women go to the hospital more. They go to hospital maybe for antenatal booking, for delivery, for infant welfare clinic and all sort of things, for family planning. And in the course of that, they check their blood pressure. When you see a man going to the hospital, just know that something opened today. Men usually don't go to the hospital. Now, blood pressure is the force exerted by your blood when it is circulating against the walls of the blood vessels. Okay? And there are two numbers that we normally read to us. Next slide, please. There are two numbers we normally read to us. The first one is called the systolic blood pressure, and that measures when the heart contracts. You know, this is the way our heart beats. That's where you have boom, 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 boom. And that heart is one faithful organ that serves you until death do you part. So it's a faithful organ that we also are supposed to nurture and take care of very well. Okay? So when it does this, what you get is the systolic pressure, and when it relaxes, is the diastolic pressure. And you cannot know what your blood pressure is unless you are checking yourself. Now, usually, what we get when we check you in the hospital or in the office space is different from what you get at home. There are two different scenarios. I don't have time to go through all the charts. But you see, when you are going to check your blood pressure, it must be about at least 30 minutes. You know, after you must have eaten, there should be no food 30 minutes before. No coffee. No exercise. You want me to also say no smoking. A quiet environment is necessary. Comfortable temperature. Then you cannot take your blood pressure just immediately. You must be allowed to rest a little bit. Then during the course, you don't talk during blood pressure measurement. Now, there should be three measurements. Listen very well. 3 measurements on that same day. And we'll take the average of the last 2. Because the first one, you might not have rested well. Okay? So the second one and the third one will now look for the average of those ones to know what your blood pressure is. The other thing I would like to say is that no matter what your blood pressure is, if your blood pressure is high, we will not intervene immediately until a particular number, because we don't know the circumstances around your coming at that point. Okay? But we will give you another 2 weeks to take the blood pressure again to know whether it's a sustained rise in blood pressure or it was just a chance finding. Okay? So we will tell an individual that is hypertensive when blood pressure measured on 2 different days, at least 2 weeks apart on both days, is equal to or above 140/90. Don't forget 140 is the systolic, 90 is the diastolic. Or if on a single visit, your blood pressure is above 180/110, we will intervene immediately. Let me tell you a story of a good Samaritan that became a beneficiary of his being a good man, a good neighbor. A man was sick in the community and they needed to rush him to the hospital. So this man, this elderly man, was the one they found. Please help us with your vehicle to take this man to the hospital. When they rushed the man to the hospital, maybe he fainted or he collapsed or something. They were measuring the man's blood pressure. So this man too said, please, let me seize the opportunity to measure my own. And they measured his blood pressure. Do you know the irony of the matter? The man they rushed to the hospital went back home. This man that took him to the hospital has been carrying along high blood pressure and he never knew. Do you know one funny thing? They had to admit him that day. They said, Baba, you cannot go home. Oh. He said, Are? It's not me that is ill. They said, but it is you that is sick. The man you brought is still better than you. We have attended to him. He can go home, but you cannot go home. So if on a single visit, the blood pressure is above 180, 110, that person must begin to receive attention immediately. Now, don't forget I said this is measurement taken in our offices. Can we move to the next slide? Now, I like just to show us the various categories of blood pressure. Now, number one, if your blood pressure is less than 120/80, we call that optimal blood pressure. And this is what we find mostly in women. Okay? Women at lower ages. So if your blood pressure is less than 130/85, it's still normal. If your blood pressure is between, the systolic is between 130 to 139, and the diastolic is between 80 to 89, we say that is high normal. That is pre-hypertension. You need to begin to look after yourself. Okay? But if it is 140 to 159 over 90 to 99, that is grade 1 hypertension. And for 160 to 179 systolic and 100 to 109 diastolic, grade 2 hypertension. Don't forget grade 3, which I deliberately painted in red, which we will, for that sake, admit the person so that he doesn't go into hypertensive crisis. Now, there is this special one that is called isolated systolic hypertension. It is, the systolic is equal to or more than 140, but the diastolic is still normal. So that's an isolated systolic hypertension. Now, how serious is the problem of hypertension in Nigeria? In 2015, we noted that 1 in 4 men, that is 25% of men, and 1 in 5 women had hypertension. Now you know what hypertension is now. Then fewer than 1 in 5 people with hypertension have the problem under control. Fewer than 20% of those who have hypertension have it controlled. Hypertension is never cured medically. We don't cure hypertension. We only control it. So once somebody is diagnosed hypertensive, he will continue to take drugs for that faithful servant to serve you longer. You know, I told you your heart is a very faithful servant that will serve you until death do you part. Okay? When we talk about clinical death, it's one of the things we check. We look for your pulse. Once the heart is no longer beating, the pulse is gone. Okay? And if within a short interval we can still stimulate the heart to keep working, and we can still wake it up, then work continues. So about 20% of the people with hypertension do not have their hypertension controlled. A lot of them are believers who believe that the Lord has healed me because I'm praying. You must check the numbers. It is the numbers that will tell you about what to do. Sometimes they will need to increase your medication. Sometimes they might need to start reducing it, depending on some things that you do with control. And we know that is a major cause of premature death and a leading NCD, that causes death among a lot of our people. Now, let's look at, yes, next slide. Next one. Sorry, before then. Now, we're going to look at some things. We look at the risk factors. When we talk of non-communicable diseases, we cannot talk of what is going to cause this. But we talk about risk factors that if they are there, they increase the chances of somebody having such condition. Let me first of all look at the non-modifiable risk factors. The one that you cannot do anything about. You can't do anything about family history of hypertension. If a member of your family is hypertensive, especially parents or first-level relationship, your siblings, then there is a higher tendency of you also having hypertension than other persons. There is nothing we can do about our age. As you grow older, the blood vessels get weaker. Some of them get hardened, and the level at which they are resilient is reduced. Because they are not resilient or elastic, they constitute a constriction and give the heart more work to do, to pump blood through them. There's nothing we can do about age. So as we age, definitely more people will develop high blood pressure. Now, if there are some other diseases like diabetes or kidney diseases, then there's a very high chance of that person developing high blood pressure. Diabetes will cause deposition of some, waste on the internal layer of your blood vessels and make them, narrower. So it gives the heart more work to do. Kidney the same way. There are some aspects of kidney, the function that we call the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone mechanism is affected. And the kidney is also an organ that controls blood pressure. So once that function is affected, or there's a chronic kidney disease, then hypertension is not far. But we're going to focus attention on the one we can do something about. And that's the modifiable risk factors. Now, we look at the issue of unhealthy diet. It's something we can do something about. Many people say that blacks, eat a lot of salt. There is salt in almost everything that we eat. Especially those of us who also, want to add, there are some habits that we have formed, that we add raw salt on table to food. How many of us know that when people roast their yam and they want to eat it, they add a sprinkle of salt. That's raw salt inside the oil that you used to eat. And there are some things also that when you make popcorn, you add raw salt and some other things that we keep with salt. Our salt intake, salt consumption is high. But one thing we need to know about salt intake is that it is a habit. It is a habit. Once you form the habit of raising your salt intake level, when they put salt less than that, you will not enjoy the food. It is a habit you learned over time. You can unlearn that habit. But one thing you can do, you can stop eating raw salt in food. Okay? Now, diets that are high in saturated fat and also diets that are low in fruits and vegetables, especially for our elderly people, your food should be your drugs and your drug, your food. Okay? Your food should be your drug. Somebody was advertising food supplement to me, at the garage. And I said, no, I don't need it. She was trying to convince me I need it. I said, I'm a farmer. I eat natural vegetables and fruits, so I don't need the supplement, okay? Now, physical inactivity, less exercise. Consumption of tobacco and alcohol, dangerous combination. Being overweight or obese is also a modifiable risk factor. We can begin exercise to lose weight, especially for our ladies who will, on the long run, come down with the issue of arthritis. Those are weight-bearing joints. If you are heavy, then you are entitled to also have some pains in your knees. So we must make effort to reduce those things. Now, the common symptoms of hypertension, number one is that you must note that there may be no symptom. That's the first thing. On most occasions, there is none. Now, we divide hypertension into two. The one we call the essential hypertension, which 90% of hypertensive cases we have. For essential hypertension, we don't know what caused it. Okay? We don't know what caused it. But for the secondary hypertension that is caused by one disease or the other, some of the signs of those diseases can manifest. That's number one. Sometimes some people may have headache, especially early morning headache, sustained, persistent headache over time. Okay? If you have such and you're hypertensive, you are lucky. Pain can be a blessing. If you want to know that pain can be a blessing, come and look at my leprosy patient. The reason why their legs are damaged is because they cannot feel pain. So even when they step on things that are dangerous, they don't feel anything. So that's why they damage themselves. So pains are blessings because they can point to the fact that something is wrong. So if you have a headache, then you are lucky. So people who have headache should also have their blood pressure checked. Some people may have nosebleed. Okay? For no reason, nobody hit you. You did not fall down, but your nose is just on its own bleeding. Think about hypertension. Now, you are not supposed to be aware that your heart is beating. It's just supposed to be doing its own work quietly. The moment you begin to get aware of your heartbeat, then something is wrong. Then the moment, I'm not saying when you listen to it, but just as I'm standing or as you are seated, you're not supposed to know that your heart is beating. But when you begin to know, something is wrong. And when your heart begins to beat irregularly, it's not the usual boom, 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 boom. But that's another sound. There are missed heartbeats, there are abnormal heartbeats, then that can point to the fact that all is not well with the heart. Also, vision can change because hypertension impacts on small vessels of the body, including that of the eye, that of the kidney, that of the brain, and all the like. And that's why we want to look at this, because when you don't know that you are sick with hypertension, hypertension continues to damage organs in the body. It can damage the heart. It can give somebody a heart attack. Okay? So, it can damage the brain. And that's why many people talk about stroke. Stroke can be due to hypertension. Stroke can also happen because of the sister to hypertension, diabetes. There's a blockage of the blood vessel, or there's a bursting of a blood vessel due to hypertension. So hypertension can damage the kidney. Both hypertension and kidney problem, sometimes we don't know which one came first. Kidney problem can cause hypertension. Hypertension can further worsen kidney problem. So if any man has both, then that's a double barrel. So when we want to manage hypertension, we're trying to protect the target organ. Okay, next. Continue. Yes, continue. Aim of hypertension treatment. Okay, continue. Okay, so one of the things we are trying to do is to reduce damage to those organs of the body. That's why we're managing hypertension. Because you may not even know you have any problem. But we're protecting the heart, we're protecting the kidneys, we're protecting the eyes and those other organs. So we want to reduce your risk of cardiovascular problem. Heart attack, sudden death, sudden collapse, and all those things. So we want to reduce death, okay? Now, next slide. How do we prevent, which is most important to us? We have talked about lifestyle modification. It's one of the most powerful tools. I have seen people who are very religious in taking their drugs as prescribed by the doctor, but they are doing nothing about lifestyle modification. It is the most important. It is the most important thing. Now, some of the cultural and social habits that we need to change. I have talked about some things that we do in terms of the way we eat our roasted food. Puts a lot of, then our women that still cook with seasoning cube. Those seasoning cube are rich in salt. We will still get to the issue of salt. The way we prepare our food, then there's a need for us to raise awareness of the impact of hypertension so that our people can be healthy. Okay? Now, let's look at dietary salt restriction. We need to deliberately go on low-salt diet. Low-salt diet is possible. When you reduce the amount of salt you use in cooking, you may not like it at the initial stage, especially if you are 40 years and above. You are 40 years and above, you need to start learning how to reduce your salt intake. Now, approach near saltless eating. Is it possible? Near saltless eating. I know some food items that whether you add salt or not, they can be eaten on their own. Beans is one of them. Okay, beans. Roasted meat. If almost saltless can be eaten, it will have its taste because the fat that comes out of the roasting will give it taste. Okay? So skip salt in food that can be enhanced by other flavors. What are those other flavors? We should ask our mommy. Ede, iru, ogiri, and all those things. Alubosa, they are very good to season your food and to make it tasty. Okay? So adopt local alternatives. Yes. Such as crayfish, locust bean, onion, and all the like. Then we need to encourage awareness. Now there are some insensible sources of salt that you take that you don't know. Some of them in bakings, bread and baked foods. Then some of these sugar-free drinks. You know what some people are telling me now? They are telling me that we don't taste salt in those things. What we call salt is not what you call salt. What you are eating when you cook your food is called sodium chloride. It's because of the sodium that we are talking about this issue of blood pressure. It's sodium. So some of these other things we are talking about has sodium. Your drinks are preserved with sodium, bicarbonate or bicarbonate of soda. They call it soda or sodium. So one of the things we want you to do is to check the packs of whatever you are eating, especially those canned food. Those of us who are eating canned food, they are usually preserved with a lot of salt. You just taste them and you will see. Okay? Processed juice. Join the farmers. Take fresh fruit as opposed to processed juice. And it will be well with you. Salted butter and cheese. Now some drugs. Some drugs. Some of us who buy diclofenac. There is diclofenac sodium and there's diclofenac potassium. So we are aging, let's choose diclofenac potassium over diclofenac sodium. So when next you want to buy diclofenac for your, joint pains, insist on diclofenac potassium. Don't take diclofenac sodium. Okay? Then some factory processed meat products. Those canned food. Some drugs such as our effervescent vitamin C. They also contain sodium. There's a recommendation of the amount of sodium you are supposed to take in a day. It is recommended you should not take more than 1 teaspoon. 1 teaspoon of salt. Remember, you ate in the morning, you ate in the afternoon, you ate in the night. All of the salt you will take in one day should not be more than 2.4 grams, which is 1 teaspoon. Okay? Now, if you want to know some of those powerful, always check next slide, please. Next. Always check the packaging or the labels of what you are buying. They will tell you the amount of sodium. Now, when you are looking for salt, just look for sodium. All right? Now, the next thing I'm going to look at is the issue of weight. We have said that hypertension, one of the risk factors is obesity or being on the big side. So what are the things we're going to be measuring here? There is a measurement of your weight against your height that we call body mass index that help us to tell whether you are overweight, whether you are underweight, or whether you are just normal. Now, next slide. We know that obesity is a bad thing. Hello? Because it's a risk factor for developing hypertension, it's a risk factor for developing diabetes, risk factor for developing heart disease, risk factor for developing thromboembolism. Thromboembolism is a condition whereby your blood begins to clot inside due to fatty materials. And when they clot like that, and that clot is dislodged, it can go and block one vessel somewhere. And if it is vessel of the brain, it causes stroke. If it is of the heart, it causes heart attack or anything. So obesity is a thing to be fought deliberately. And I think it's sufficient for us to take it as a whole discussion. Now, it's also diabetes, like we have said, respiratory diseases, and also arthritis. So you see why we need to fight obesity, because it's a risk factor for many diseases. Okay? Then diabetes, there's something they call diabesity, which refers to coexistence of diabetes and obesity. Okay, both of which worsen hypertension. If somebody is obese and the person is diabetic, that is double barrel against hypertension. It becomes more challenging to control that hypertension. Then arthritis in obesity is particularly paved the way for vicious cycle of steroid therapy. Now, when people have arthritis, they will start taking some drugs. Some of those drugs, whether the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug or steroids to reduce their inflammatory condition, both of them will still worsen hypertension. So you see how even your joint pain is also going to worsen high blood pressure because of the medication that you are taking. So some other comorbid conditions, then our local culture sometimes can be a barrier to our weight control. For instance, we believe that finishing all food served on plate, however much, we beat children for not finishing their food. They must finish everything. Number two, we believe that people who are not robust is a sign of poverty, that they are not well fed. Hello? We see bigness as a sign of good living, as a sign of wealth. In short, when people are not big, we begin to ask questions. What's wrong? You are not eating well. Okay? I was a victim also, beating a child for not eating well. Now, the eldest of the male having the protein serving in resource-restricted household. Now, sometimes even in our own situation, especially for the senior people, the ogas, your younger colleagues want to honor you. They will give you 4 meats, and they will take 1, and you think they are treating you nicely. They are pushing you further. They'll be going ahead of us. Parents, frequently mothers, eating at irregular intervals or late in the day after taking care of everybody. Mommy, come and eat. When you eat very late in the night, close to when you go to sleep, you are looking for trouble. Those things actually encourage weight gain. So what do we do with weight management? Next slide. Plan your meal. Eat your last meal at or before 7 p.m. 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Please help me to remind your neighbor. 7 p.m. If you eat after 7 and that food is heavy, you are not helping that faithful servant. You are overloading it. Okay? So, meal portion sizing. Eating can be a habit. Sleeping can be a habit. Those things are habits. Eating, whether you eat large or you eat small, is a habit you have formed. You will discover that when you gradually start to reduce your food portion, you will not die. A time will come, it will become part and parcel of you. Okay? It will become, the body is a very good servant. It will obey you the way you push it. Okay? Now, family-centered approach, adapting locally available fruits, vegetables, nuts, poultry as major component of meal plan across age spectrum. This is one area that is difficult for us to practice. If you go to anywhere and say, Ejo, onje woleni, you know what they will tell you? We have eba, we have amala, fufu, rice, and whatever. That is in this side of the country. If you go to the east and ask them, what food do you have? They will not tell you eba, amala. To them, what food is the soup They will tell you we have afan, we have edikaikon, we have draw, we have vegetable soup. That's what they will tell you. Do you understand? It is you that will now choose what you want to use to eat it. Because to them is the soup that is the food. Okay? So they have a better mindset about food than us. All right? Now, if you go outside our own country, go to Benin Republic, ask them, what food do you have? They will tell you fish, chicken, beef. That's the food that they are talking about. All those yoeba and amala is now what you want to use to eat the food. That's not the food. The chicken, the meat, the fish, that's the food. So we need to start looking at the fact that our own concept of food here need to start, looking at it gradually. Probably reducing the carbohydrates and more of those. Now, this is also important for those of us who are yalako ways, opting for natural and less industrially processed food. Brothers and sisters, eba is better than semovita. Eba is a natural food. Semo is processed. Okay? It's a natural. Eba has more fibers to help your bowel movement better than semo. I'm not saying you shouldn't eat semo. I've not said so. I'm only telling you that, your natural food are better, And for those of us who also like to take fruit juice, your natural fruit and vegetable are better. So in trying to manage our weight, we must know that drinks also count. Now, alcohol is calorie dense. Somebody said we should not always assume that everybody is on the same stage. Alcohol is calorie dense. Now, I want to tell us some of the people that take alcohol. Many of you don't know why they take alcohol. Go and look at those who take ogogoro very well. Part of it is poverty. And I'll tell you why it is so. Alcohol is rich in calorie. The amount of calorie you will get from 100 naira alcohol is more than the amount of calorie you will get from 400 naira eba. So when they take such, they feel they don't need, and many of them now, because of that, don't eat. You understand? Because they are not eating, the nutrient they're supposed to get from food is not there. So they start having ill health. But we must know that alcohol actually gives them calorie. So physical activities must be increased. Form healthy habits early in life. There are some times when we go for exercises, children don't want to go. You know why they don't want to go? They think it is mommies and daddies that are big that are supposed to be doing exercises. It's not because of being big. You need to form that habit early in life. Make it a habit from childhood. Okay? Make it a habit from childhood. Encourage safe spacing in school and neighborhood for exercise. Let there be opportunity, for children to run around. These days, many of us are sending our children to private schools. Private school does not have the luxury of giving you so much spaces for football field, for volleyball field, for lawn tennis field. Where will they get that luxury? They will rather put buildings, and the children will not have opportunity to do exercise or run around and the like. For those of us who beat children for running around, God will forgive us. Now, we are also asked to limit screen time. Limit screen time. Do you know what screen time means? The time you spend at television. When you are spending time at television, you are just seated there. Or when you are spending time on your phone, you are just seated there. So limit those things that, these days we don't go and visit our friends again. We call them on phone. We don't go and solve many problems for ourselves again. We make phone calls. So those lifestyle that we have changed, the lifestyle of affluence, They are helping to build trouble. I remember that in some offices, you have telecom, you have a lot of people to serve you. You move from your vehicle that is AC to your office that is AC to your house that is AC. You have a lot of people to send on errand, so you don't do much yourself. Those are things we need to look after. Encouraging children in cooking activities and house chores is a very good thing. Don't excuse them, even when you have house help. Work when you can. Do the housework physically often. What does physically often means? Don't automate too many things. There are a lot of automation now. We have dishwashers, we have clothes washers. So we're looking for something to start ironing our clothes. If we don't have, we'll get house help to iron them. Then use the stairs instead of elevators. Then daily brisk walking, at least 5 days in a week. And they say walk as though you are late for a meeting. You know how you walk when you are late for a meeting? That's the kind of walk they expect you to walk. Brisk walking. Some of us carry some things on our phone that measure the steps we take daily. And I have set for myself 10,000 steps on daily basis. So because of that target, on many occasions I will have to stand up from my seat in my office and go myself to where some of my staffs are. And I said that, no, let us go. I said, no, let me go too. Sometimes you want to go within Okemoson. You know, your driver is asking, okay, let me bring the car. I said, don't bring the car. I can also trek. People think it's not, you know, it belittles you or whatever to trek. Please drop your car and trek. Trek is good. It's good for the heart. It's good for the body. Now, hobbies that encourage physical activity. How many of us have time for sport? Sport? I'm coming back there some other time. Sport, physical activities, games, and the like. You know, those ones also impact our brain and our thinking. We've talked about alcohol avoidance. Just move on. Then, tobacco. Now, why am I bringing out the issue of tobacco? I know that most of us here would not admit that we smoke. But some of us are smoking. You are not the primary smoker. But because you sit with somebody that smokes, you smoke more than that person. Okay? So don't stay where somebody is smoking cigarettes. Ideally, they are not supposed to smoke in the public any longer. But in case they are not obeying that instruction, you do yourself a favor. Move away. Okay? So that's just one thing. If you look at tobacco, I said personal or secondhand smoking is dangerous to health. Personal or secondhand smoking is dangerous to health because it affects many things. Now, I just move on. I just like to inform us of what we have in place from the Public Health Department in the Ministry of Health. We have a health facility, a primary health care facility in every ward, at least one in every ward, that provide routine screening for blood pressure and for blood sugar. So about 236 of them. And we have subsidized drugs there that the program has provided for. These facilities are in the 20 LGAs, and our health workers have been trained. And they don't screen alone. They can also counsel us on some exercises and lifestyle modification. Also, we need to inform us that very soon, we will embark on a project that we call Project 10 Million. It's a decision by the federal minister to screen 10 million Nigerians for high blood pressure and for diabetes. Okay? And we are hoping in Ogun State, we are supposed to be screening 350,000. That is the quota given to us. We're sharing that quota for each LGA, what they will screen. So when that program begins, we will announce the date. And we also are looking up to churches, that churches who have health workers, we want to push them to deliberately procure blood pressure monitoring device and blood sugar monitoring device, so that people who are not hypertensive, they are supposed to check their blood pressure. If you are not hypertensive and you are 40 years and above, you are supposed to check your blood pressure, we say once in 6 months. Is that too much? Once in 6 months. But if there is any symptom, like I told you, men don't go to hospital. It's only women that go mostly. So if there are any symptoms, if you happen to come in contact with health facility at all, insist that your blood pressure must be monitored. So we hope that we can do our blood pressure for us. Every month there's a provision in the church. Come and get your blood pressure checked. And once your blood pressure is checked and you are told it is abnormal, then you know that apart from all this lifestyle modification that we have talked about, you must be on drugs. What did I say? You must be on drug. And you cannot stop your drug by yourself, saying that I am not feeling anything. Maybe when I started taking drug, it was because I was having headache. And headache took me to clinic, and it was what made me to know that I'm hypertensive. But now, the moment I started using my drugs, the headache has gone. So I don't need to take drugs again. That's not correct. The best thing is to take your drug daily. Have a given time that you have made for you to take your drug. Sometimes we call it agilo. We call it agilo. And we also call it maya mije. That is, when you are traveling, you carry your drugs. Okay? It goes along with you. If you like, put one in your handbag. Put one set in your bedroom. Put one set on your dining table. So that at any point in time, you must take your drug. You must take it regularly. Every day. Don't say because I forgot to take the one for yesterday, I will take double today. No. Don't say because these drugs are getting expensive, must I take it every day? After all, there are no symptoms. I will take it every other day. That's not correct. Your heart is being adjusted to another lifestyle. You must maintain it. In conclusion, said hypertension is a leading cardiovascular disease and non-communicable disease at large. It's a silent killer, and efforts should be geared towards prevention, early detection, and commencement of treatment in order to avert premature death. Visit the nearest health facility today. Check your blood pressure. The last slide, to prevent and manage hypertension, a life course approach is necessary. From young to the elderly, everybody must be involved. Thank you very much.